Hello and welcome, everyone. And remember, for the Alliance.
Or the
we definitely-
Alliance.
Yeah, we definitely need an intro.
Alliance.
Well,
I do videos as well, so if you need an intro.
Oh, please. We're. Oh, no. We lost Tom. We already lost a man. No, the horde has struck.
Wait,
anyway.
you get me? I'm still here.
Yeah. We lost you for a minute to the horde, but you're back. So we're here, Tom, Dan, and I, with the amazing some dude, or I should say Patrick, who, well, is quite the editor and writer. And honestly, looking at his Darkworld crowdfunded, kind of, and the map I really like in particular, just to quickly get that out of
You're kind of breaking in.
Really attempt to make a whole. Can you guys hear me?
Right now,
Yes.
I can.
This is an attempt to make a world that, well, the kind of scope that really hasn't been seen in fantasy since probably I would almost say Dragonlance, from what I can tell. And there are some Dragonlance veterans I've noticed in your roster, Patrick, which is pretty
that was actually a lot of the inspiration.
Oh, really?
Huge
It's
fan
also
of Dragon.
Well, I don't know if you could tell, but we're kind of fans ourselves. Brothers Cran and all. So, oh my gosh. Yeah. Like, that was the first thing I noticed. And I basically, well, I squealed like a little girl because, yay, Dragonlance. Because, like, before we turn to our questions, I was just going to preface by saying, really, the genre has not been the same since Dragonlance really kind of, I'll say, fell in 2008. It, like, the genre is kind of, in a weird way, kind of lost its captain. And with Christopher Tolkien,
I feel the same way, exactly the same way.
Oh, really? Well,
that was a big inspiration for this. Is I wanted to bring that 80s and 90s TSR feel back to some sort of IP.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that was a big inspiration for it.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you, because I think the genre is also, well, it lost its captain in a way, and it lost its first mate with Christopher Tolkien's passing. So really, the genre's kind of hit rocks, and it needs to find its way again. And I hope you don't mind me saying that. And like, the genre has lost navigation. It's without a compass, so it's lost in the storm. And
well, when Wizards of the Coast pretty much canceled all their writing and novels and everything, that was a big downfall.
Yeah,
I don't know what their reasoning behind that was. I haven't looked into it, but I think that was a big problem.
It was. All right, so Patrick, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, well, I have been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was about 13 years old. I've been interested in it. I don't even know how I discovered it. Maybe I saw it in a few stores here and there, but I had a friend who had talked to about it. He had played it some, so he had a little game set up, and we played AD&D First Edition. I immediately went out and bought some modules which I didn't understand. I didn't realize that there weren't rules in them. I was just picking up things for the pretty artwork, pretty much. Then the same friend had, told me I had to get the box sets. So again, I think it was the only one in there. I got the Immortals basic box set. So looking through that, it said to get the other box set. So I finally got around to getting the red box set. So that's kind of where I started, and then tried to run a few games in that. Then quickly went over into AD&D, and it's just been a passion ever since. Fixing to be 52 next month, so it's been a while.
Did you play 3.5?
Yes. I played every edition except for 4th, and just because I'm a collector, I got the 3 core books a few years ago when the stuff wasn't as popular as it is now. So I found like a box set with the 3 core rule books in it for like $15.
Wow.
So I picked 4th edition. I've read through it a little bit. Not a fan. It was more like they were trying to make a video game into a role-playing game or something. It just didn't feel right.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah,
to be fair to anybody that likes 4th edition, I barely read through it. I haven't ever played it. So
we ironically tried 5th edition, didn't like it, but the lore 5th edition I liked. At least the initial lore. Like
I play 5th edition because it's the most known, I guess, out there right now. But my problem with it is it's like every character is the same. There's not a lot of difference between them. I do have quite a bit of books. I've actually ordered the new player's handbook. Again, I'm a collector though, so. But the feeling to me it's just like a wizard and a fighter are no different now. It's fluff. Is your D10 coming from a spell or from a sword?
I don't like
it's just all fluff and in your mind on what you're playing. The rest of it just seems like you're really mechanically, you just seem like the same no matter what class you play. So it's a little dulled down, but I could take pretty much any role-playing game, and I feel like it's up to the game master to really do it. So I can run 5th edition games more like AD&D games, and that's actually my preference. Is so I use 2nd edition with a little bit of 1st edition, sort of a mix up of the two. So that's what I run mostly.
All right.
Well, ironically enough, I never got into gaming growing up. It's just I got into the whole world of D&D through when I was introduced to this book right here.
The best book in the saga. Oh man, I'll divulge a little. I remember I was abused as a kid, and one of the books that I remember just pulling up in my mom's garden room, because she liked to have a little sunroom with flowers in it, was Legend of Huma, and it would curl up and escape to Kryn. So Nax, his Legend of Huma is one of the greatest fantasy books ever written.
Yes,
I agree. Actually, what got me into Dragonlance, it's probably about 14 or 15, and we had read The Hobbit in school. It was just I had actually really, really good English teacher who played Dungeons and Dragons, and we used to play with him after school for like an hour or two. But as one of the required reading books, we had The Hobbit. So I'd read through The Hobbit. I'd seen the cartoon, you know, when I was younger, and I loved it. I had recorded it off of TV and watched it quite a bit. But reading it and everything, you know, I was always into dragons. And
Yeah.
What is the? I don't know, it's been a while since I read it, but it's like 2 pages of the dragon, you know, doing its thing, and then just kind of gone. You know, it flies off and gets killed. It's kind of gone. So I was looking for a book to read. That was when my interest in books started. As instead of something I had to do for school, it was something that you know, started being something that I wanted to do, and I wanted to read a book about dragons. So we had a new kid from some other state. I think it was Kentucky. He came to our school, and I got the privilege of showing him around the school and everything. I just happened to be walking by the principal's office when they walked out. He's like, "Hey, can you show this kid around?" Whatever. So I mentioned it to him when he had started talking about Dungeons and Dragons. So I said, are there any good books out there? He's like, "Oh, I got one that's full of dragons. I'll bring it tomorrow." And he did, and it was the Dragons of Autumn Twilight.
Good book.
It was well loved and read already when I got it. So it is in pieces and falling apart. I would show it to you, but I am in the middle of trying to sell a house, so a lot of my stuff is in storage
I get that.
right now, so I don't have all my stuff. So, but I just kind of thumbed through the book, and another inspiration for Darkworld, by the way. Before every chapter, they had pictures, little black and white pictures of kind of what was coming up in the next chapter. So I flipped through, kind of skimming words, looking for the word dragon. Couldn't really find a lot. And then in the back, there's where they are in Pax Tharkus, or not Pax Tharkus, where the black dragon is, the ruins, Zaxxaroth.
Oh, Zaxxaroth.
Yeah. And so there's a picture of a black dragon on there. So I'm like, oh, there obviously is a dragon in this part. So I started reading from there, and just got up to the part where they're interacting with the dragon a little bit. And I'm like, okay, I don't know who these people are. So I went all the way back to the first and started reading it straight through. And I was just hooked immediately. Ever since I've read that book 5 times. I think I've read all the first 3 books 5 times, and then the Legends 4 times. So, but yeah, that, like I said, the black and white art, I've introduced that into the first Darkworld book, Legends of Lornia. So instead of each chapter, since it's just a novelette by each of the authors, it's 5 pictures, 1 for each story.
Okay. All right. We'll move now to the questions we gave you. Tom could start with, well, I think you answered the first one. So I guess we can move to the next one, and Tom will take it from there.
All right. It seems your work has been quite a success for what you're trying to accomplish. Why do you think that is?
No, I don't know. I think a lot of it goes back to the DMs Guild. Probably around 2013, 2014. I found out about the DMs Guild. And at that time, it was pretty new, and there wasn't very many people on there. So I just made an account for it, set it up. And I think a lot of the success just came from the fact that there were people out there, no offense to anybody that may be watching this, that didn't do so good, but there's a lot of crap on there. You know, anybody could write anything and, you know, throw it up under the Dungeons and Dragons name and get published, and there just wasn't a lot of good quality stuff. So I started making things, being an artist, being a writer, being an editor, and everything like that. Knowing a little bit about Microsoft Word, I had just everything that a lot of people didn't have. So a lot of stuff didn't have art, didn't have stuff like that. There was no art at all on the DM's Guild at that time. As a matter of fact, I was the first person. I just looked through, and there was no art, and I'm like, huh. So that was my very first thing I put up, was an art package. Being new and in its infancy, I had a lot of access to the people that were running it at the time. So I kind of talked to them, became friends on Facebook with them, you know, and stuff like that. Talked to them, got an idea for what sells good on one bookshelf sites and stuff. So I put the art up. It didn't really do very good, and I put everything. I just grabbed a collection of every little scribble I'd ever done and put it on there. So it was pretty bad. I've changed it a little bit over the years, taking out some of the worst stuff, the eyesores, and putting in some newer stuff. But I think just getting in on the infancy of it, that was part of the success. Was I tried to make stuff more like AD&D instead of, even though 5th edition was the main one they were going with. So my older stuff looks more like 1st edition type stuff, but it did look more professional than, you know, the little almost kid-like drawings and stuff people were putting on for covers and stuff like that. So, and I had an advantage. I didn't have to pay for art. I didn't have to pay for, you know, all the stuff that a lot of people have to pay for. And just getting in early and getting a bunch of stuff out there, I think it's just kind of luck of the draw. And not only that, I got to know a lot of, I don't know how much you guys know about the Dungeon Masters Guild, but I was in a group of maybe 5 or 6 people. There was MT Black, Jeff Stevens, Jeremy Forbing, Tony Petreka. Just our group was getting the #1 hits, you know. So we actually got together and started collaborating, and we made, you know, like basically a player's handbook too, and things like that got real popular. So, and like I said, talking to the people that ran it, they said that on other sites, the traps and the magic items and stuff like that were the most popular things. So I did a couple of those, and actually had several weeks with both of them at the #1 spot. So just timing, I think, overall, because within a year or two after it started, it got a lot more crowded and a lot more talent. So timing, mostly timing, doing the right thing, being able to produce stuff with little to no overhead, so I could get things out a lot quicker, you know.
Okay. That's interesting. Where did you get the idea for your story?
For the story that's in Legends of Lornia, or for the overall project?
Let's say both.
So Darkworld it originally started way back. Probably in my late teens when I started thinking about a world that was in complete darkness and had no sun. That doesn't really scientifically work out, but being in fantasy, you can always use magic as your excuse. But I kept it in the back burner for a long time, and it just sort of grew into, what if it wasn't completely dark, but it was, kind of stagnant, like our moon, goes around the earth. That planet goes around the sun that way and has one side in the dark and one in the light. And again, scientifically, that's very hard to to explain, but again, fantasy and magic. So up until probably about 10 years ago, it was just a thought that I'd kept over time. I'd actually tried to make a world like that play in, but that campaign just didn't last very long. One of those things where you get a few people together and then one of them gets married, or one of them gets a harder job. Everybody kind of has lax jobs, I guess, in their 20s and stuff, but get more serious jobs and stuff. So the group kind of grew apart. So it didn't last very long. So other than that, it just kind of stayed in the back of my mind. And about 10 years ago is when I really started trying to make it a reality. And it developed from there. A lot of it started when I started talking to Richard Knack. I don't remember our first conversations really, but I had mentioned to him that I had an idea for a world and he was interested in it. So I kind of talked to him about it, and right there on the spot pretty much came up with a little bit of lore and stuff, and he got interested in it, and it just kind of bloomed from there. And then I asked him if I was going to do the campaign setting first before any books. So at that time I'd asked him if he would write the foreword, and he was like, sure. So got him to write the foreword to it, and then it probably wasn't even a couple of weeks later, it was like, what about a story? How much would it cost to write a story? So we sat down and talked about that, and that was the beginning of this project.
Cool.
As far as my story in it, it's like most of my stories that I write, I have this weird zone that I go into. I come up with characters and maybe a little bit of a plot. And what I do is I get those characters talking, and they start talking back and forth. And then before I know it, I'm not even in control of those characters anymore. It's almost like I'm a stenographer just writing down what they do, so.
Yeah.
All right. Who did the trailer for your teaser trailer? Did you do it yourself?
That was me. Yeah. Yep. I've had a free video editor for a long time, and I used it a little bit to make some YouTube videos a while back, but it had kind of laid stagnant. So I decided to put together a trailer, and when I went to publish it, it's like, oh, you're using stuff that isn't free, so you have to buy the subscription for it and everything. I was like, oh man, I don't want to do that. But when I got to looking into it, it was only like $20 a year. So I was like, that's worth it. So I went ahead and paid the money and just playing around with it. Kind of each video I learned more and more. And so I've actually made a couple of YouTube trailers now for some people and some openings for their YouTube channels and stuff like that. So, and I have a music maker as well, and do the music and everything. So.
Okay.
Well,
Tom, you can take the next one.
Why crowdfund a book?
Part of that, so when I started talking to Richard, and then got introduced to some of the other writers and stuff, I just started noticing that they're doing a lot of self-publishing, and that was another awakening for me. Is these writers don't have an IP anymore. They don't have Dragonlance. They don't have any of the old TSR stuff. So they're just self-promoting and are just marketing, doing all their stuff on Amazon and things like that. And I was like, I'd like to give these guys an IP to work with. And so that's another part of how Darkworld got going. Was I wanted to have, like I said, that feel of the 80s and 90s TSR books and stuff like that, and give them a world to play around in. So that was also a reason. The crowdfunding, I don't even know if I have an Amazon account. I don't know much about it or publishing on there. So I just felt like Kickstarter would be a good place. The book, I funded all the stuff myself. I paid all the writers. I paid for all the editing, any extra art and stuff I paid for. So it was already funded before the Kickstarter even started. The Kickstarter was just partially a means to get it out there. Rest of it was a little bit of finishing up and stuff. It gets tiring doing a lot of things on a project, not being able to outsource stuff. So a lot of the crowdfunding, the goal was to just get some extra money to do some more art and stuff. And I'm kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. So some of the money that's going off this is going into the next project. Like I said, the Legends of Lornia that just got funded was already funded. So the money coming in from that is just to kind of help Darkworld as an IP.
Well, okay. Well, I've got two questions myself. Who came up with the map that I saw on the crowdfund? Because it looked really great. And I said that as a cartographer. I make maps for my own world, and yours easily blew mine out of the water, for one thing. And the other is, what advice would you give for when it comes to crowdfunding and whatnot? Because it seems like rocket science to me.
Yeah, it does. So for the map, I created a map. Just
Wow.
The only thing I really knew that I wanted when I started drawing out the map was, you've got the light on one side and the dark on the other side. And that little gray area in between, I wanted to be just sort of like a land bridge connecting the two. Other than that, I just started drawing. That's just kind of the way I'm with. I love creating. That's being a DM. That's my favorite thing, is just creating worlds and maps and everything. I overcreate. So I suggest, if you don't love it, just start off with a small area and let your players go where they want and create the map further out, as they discover it. Because otherwise you're going to make a million little towns that they will never go to and never see. But to me, that's part of the fun. I love creating towns and stuff. So, as far as advice on crowdfunding, this is my first one, and it's, I thought I'd hit gold because the first few hours were just bam, bam, bam. You could sit there and just watch it going up and up and up. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is great. And then after the second or third day, you get that plateau. So at that point, it began. I realized you've got to keep pushing it every single day, and literally on days where I wouldn't push it or the other authors weren't really throwing it out there, you'd get nothing, and then after a while I felt like we'd spent our resources, and all of our fans combined, that was it. So it was really hard. Finding out the marketing niche in that is probably the hardest thing. Finding a way to get it to people and get it seen. Because even if you think about it, some of the crappiest ideas, there's probably 1 million people out there that would buy it for $1. That would make you $1 million. So that seems like an easy concept, but how do you reach 1 million people, that specific 1 million people, that want to buy your thing? So the marketing, just like I said, I don't even know the advice to give, because this was my first experience and it was rough. It was, every day was just a chore, trying to think of ways to get it out there to people without spamming. I didn't want people getting tired of it. Oh my gosh, there's that stupid Darkworld thing again. But it's funded, it's over with, so so you don't have to worry about seeing it until my next project.
And I ordered the hardcover and the a digital download of the role playing game. So I'm looking forward to that, really.
I really want the hardcover, but money's tight right now. But I might just go ahead and do it anyways. Because it like I said, it's been years since I saw anything of Richard Knack, and I'm a fanboy of his, so he's attached to this, so I have to buy it. At some point, I must buy everything.
I completely understand. If I went back in time and told my 14-year-old self that one day I'd be collaborating with Richard on a project, I'd whatever. Yeah. So but the world of the internet makes it easier to connect with people. So
yeah, I have to admit, I probably would have been so moved, I'd have burst into tears at the time if I was told I'd ever collaborate with him. But wow, lucky you. All right. Dan can take it away from here.
Okay. What kind of fantasy universe or mythic fiction, as Joe likes to term, it is?
Is this?
Is this?
It's I wanted a little bit more of a dark fantasy than traditional stuff. I've actually seen, like, the Dragonlance books are considered young adult, and I never really thought about that until I saw them labeled as that. I mean, they get really dark in some areas, but
Yeah.
I wanted to get into more of the dark fantasy as opposed to the high fantasy or whatever. So I had all the writers. I came up with a story for every one of the novelettes, basically ahead of time. What I did was, in the campaign setting book that we're working on, I have a list of history on there. I just created an entire history for it, and I pretty much let the authors pick off of that of what they wanted to write. So at the title of the book at the top, it'll have a number, and that's the number of the year that their story takes place on the planet. And it's scattered all over the place because like I said, I just let them pick. I think Richard Knack had the most freedom on his, because I'd talked to him a little bit about the storyline or whatever, and he came up with the most of it, I pretty much just gave him a couple of characters, and then told him to make up the rest. So he had a lot more freedom. The other writers, I had specific things, for that history that they were writing about, and I had it kind of laid out sort of in an outline, so they used that to go by. Like one of the things, Jean, her story, she had goblins in it. So she didn't look over the notes I gave her because we don't have goblins in my world. So I had a new race of called Rotier, which are like rat creatures. They're kind of like little rat men. So basically, we just went in and changed everywhere she had goblin to rat. So, and she rewrote a little bit of it. But
that kind of makes me think a little bit of the version. I don't know if you've read Brian Jocks. You ever read Brian Jocks?
No.
He
Not familiar with that.
Redwall. There was a race of people that were kind of like
Brian
rat,
Jouk.
that were like rat people too. That but that whole story, they were all animals.
Okay. So I'm not gonna lie, they're Skaven. If you've ever played Warhammer, they're completely stolen from that. They're basically Skaven. So hopefully I don't get sued.
So not the Redwall mice.
No, they're nasty little. They're basically the goblins of my world. But there was a few things I just got rid of that don't exist in Darkworld. So goblins are one of them. Goblins seem to always be the first thing you go at or up against in role-playing games, fantasy role-playing games. So.
Or orcs.
Yeah, I still have orcs. Although in Darkworld we have pig-faced orcs, so we still have the old AD&D type orcs.
Oh, okay.
And I won't tell you where I got the main look from my orcs from, because I would have
Zelda.
before. I'm going to give it away, but I'm not going to say it directly. George Lucas never sued people. He loved people using his stuff and making fun of it. But now that Disney owns it, I can't tell you where I got my big face orcs. I think you understand that. So, some kind of guards and somebody's palace.
Oh,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
I got you on that one.
Well, I was going to say the pig-faced orcs. I remember Zelda had them, but they called them moblins.
Yeah.
I really like moblins. So what other kind of races are there in these stories?
So I don't want to give too much away. There's Exaltum, which are favorites of the gods. So the gods in Darkworld are not passive at all. They're kind of like the old Greek gods and Roman gods. They meddle in human affairs, and that's a lot of the basis for Darkworld. One guy got pregnant by another god, and sort of illegal to have children gods without the specific, consent from the major god. So this sort of was an affair that kind of happened and was kind of kept secret. So she created Torbelin, which is Darkworld, as a place to hide her son. So she even kept it from the god that got her impregnated. But he finds out about it. There's God War, all this magic's thrown about, and that's how you got Darkworld. It used to be a regular world, spun like our Earth and everything, but now it's all messed up because of the gods and their little antics. So
the little questions.
Yeah. So yeah, my gods, they're very bad. You know, they just they like to create things, and then they don't like things that other people created. So that's
So they're
actually
kind of
how
like
the what's that?
they're kind of like Takesis then.
Yeah. They meddle in human affairs a lot. So,
So
what was the second part of that? I feel like I didn't answer that completely right. I may
what
have got
other
off on a
races?
tangent.
What
Oh,
other
the
races?
races and stuff. So the gods have each god gets one chosen, and that chosen gets a few special powers and an extended life. So the Exaltum can live for thousands of years, and each one of them sort of has a goal, which is something else I stole from Dragonlance. How the gnomes all have their life goal, you know. So each one has it, and they may not know what it is. So they spend their lives basically helping others to try to get to their be-all, end-all goal. So the guy on the cover, Cornelian, he's sort of the god that created Darkworld. He's her number one guy.
So, if I may ask, I hope this is okay. The gnomes, how are they portrayed? Because I remember D&D, I didn't really like the gnomes in there or those in Dragonlance. I never understood what was their purposes. They just seemed, well, to be quite blunt, fairly retarded. But whereas when reading Tolkien's Legendarium, the gnomes are the Noldor. So that's where, like, I guess my question is, how fleshed out are the gnomes? Like, because
they're similar to Dragonlance gnomes. They like to build and always be preoccupied with something. Halflings do not exist in Darkworld as well, so gnomes sort of take the place between both of those.
Yeah. Okay.
Before Jean's story, I was thinking about, because her story is about gnomes. It's based on the gnomes, and I thought about making them evil and just these horrible little creatures, kind of like goblins or something. They don't really fit into society anywhere.
Kind of
Maybe
like
like gremlins, they're always tearing stuff up as opposed to building them. But after Gene's story, I switched them back to being a more common race. So
yeah, because that was kind of like.
I thought it would be fun to introduce gnomes into one of the adventures, and people go, you know, they have their meta thing going on, like, oh, gnomes, cool, I'll go talk to them, and then they get eaten. Yeah, so.
Because I read.
But yeah, they turned out to be more normal.
Because I read Terry Brooks, and usually in his books, like the Sword of Shannara, they're kind of like the bunch of bloodthirsty savages, basically.
Yeah. Well, and that was my original idea, but it got changed. They were going to be cannibalistic and all that. So,
well, there's always a middle ground.
You could thank Gene Raby for turning them back to normal, lovable little creatures.
There's always a middle ground that could be found. Maybe some of them are cannibalistic, bloodthirsty little savages, and others are, well, basically what it sounds like, fairly Hobbit-like to an extent.
Yeah.
Well, we could have our inventive, well, I don't want to say Shire-loving, but like home-loving sorts, and our savages who just want to eat everyone they meet. I don't know. You could always have one tribe of one and another tribe of another, and keep people guessing that way. I don't know.
Have like a gnome civil war take place in the middle of a. We have to go through this territory here to get to where we're going, but there's a gnome civil war going on. We just can't go. We just can't go anywhere near these gnomes over here because they're bloodthirsty and they kill us and eat us.
Well, yeah, because if we actually think about it, technically, in various parts of this genre, there's always been that sort of thing. Like when you look at, for example, the elves of Tolkien's Legendarium, you have the Noldor and you have the Sindarin elves. They end up basically in a civil war almost from the word go. And you have also the orcs are basically corrupted humans and elves. You have in Howard's stories, Picts versus Sumerians. They have a lot in common ethnically and culturally, but they're
even Dragonlance. You got the Sylvanesti and Qualinesti.
Yeah. So maybe two brands of gnomes could be different tribes and clans at war with each other. One corrupted, the other uncorrupted. I should not be doing this. I'm sorry. It's just we start discussing races and plot and stuff like that. I just immediately start zooming in on. Oh, well, I wonder if I could give advice. I got to stop doing that. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Not my world, not my stories. So sorry.
No, you're good.
But, well, we'll see what questions. What can we expect going forward?
Currently on the table, of course, the campaign setting, that has actually been in the works longer than Legends of Lornia, which just kickstarted. It's probably about 90% of the way done. Has very little art, has not been edited, has not been formatted or anything. But it's probably the one that's most further along, and we may have a couple of little Kickstarters between now and then, but that's probably going to be the next major one. Then we have 2 more anthologies, kind of like the Dragonlance Tales. So we're going to do 2 more of those. More adventures, of course. Let's see, a full novel. And maybe in the future, who knows, if it gets popular, some T-shirts and coffee mugs, things like that, some merch. But as long as the fans are there and willing to read and delve into Darkworld, we'll keep making stuff.
Sounds awesome. So, yeah, Tom?
What advice would you give to someone who's wanting to crowdfund for a book or start a universe like yours, but their own, of course?
Again, I'm not the right person to ask for advice on that because it was a struggle. I believe a lot of people with the first Kickstarter just want to jump right into it, start it, and gain followers. Luckily, I had a guy help me out a little bit who'd done some Kickstarters before, and you kind of want to build up a following before you actually launch. So definitely do that. If I had started from scratch on day one without having any followers, it probably wouldn't have gone as good as it did. So gain those followers. You can expect. So I think the average, from what I was told, is like 15%. So 15% of your followers will actually back it. So I beat those odds a little bit. I got up to 20% at one point, but at the end it was 18%. So 18% of my followers actually backed it. So not really the one to ask for advice. Also, it goes to mention that I've got close to $7,000 invested into Darkworld at the moment. That was done over about a 6-year period of time. And this Kickstarter didn't even make half that. So, I didn't get my money back. It doesn't matter anyway. That money to me is invested into the IP, not that Kickstarter. So if somebody's planning on funding their kicks, like I said, also it was already done. The writing, everything was already pretty much done. And so we're right at the very end of everything needed to get the book ready and get it out there. So most people aren't. Most people are at the beginning of their project when they go to Kickstarter. So if I'd been dependent on this to fund the Kickstarter, it would not have been a success. But to me, it was more important putting it out there to get it out there to people. And maybe a little selfishness on my part that I don't care as much about the money. I just want to get my work out there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And to know that there's at least 40 something people out there that at least have the chance to read, what I've created that's reward enough for me. So, and hopefully this is just the start. Like I said, this is going to help, pave the way for further things. And I think after the campaign setting gets out there, I think it'll sort of boost Darkworld into a higher category. That's another thing. Readers, reading is a lot different nowadays than it was, back in the day.
Yeah.
So, I personally would rather have a physical hard copy in my hand. I don't like reading on digital devices. So, but a lot of the world does. So, I think reading has kind of changed a lot over the years, so that may have affected it as well. I saw a lot of projects. I kind of looked at other people's, reading type stuff, books and novels and stuff they were trying to do, and I saw a lot of things that were like 2 days left, and they had like $30 out of 200 or 300 or whatever they were asking. So I also saw some that were only 2 or 3 days in and had $125,000 out of 5,000. So, somewhere out there, there's definitely an audience for it, and I'm not really sure where it is. So, don't know really what kind of advice to give, because it was just a learning experience for me. And if you really want to look at it technically, I failed. Like I said, I didn't even get half back of what I put into it. But for me, that's okay, because I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for the experience. And like I said, I think I've got a really good IP. I think it's very interesting, and I'm trying to build something up for some of these authors that are self-publishing, and stuff. Give them a world to play around with and help me create.
So do they help with the marketing?
What was that?
Do they help with the marketing?
Yes. They were very, very helpful, all of them. And I had it in the contract with each of them, but even without the contract, I'm pretty sure they all would have put in the effort. They're just great guys. They're all of them. And yes, they helped a lot.
Okay. 1 second. I'm just going to see if I can fix this mic. How's that? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I think I've been having problems. Well, more than a few. Okay. Will we ever see something like how do I put it? Comics and video games, or like any of those kind of expanded IPs, if this were to really take off?
So video game, I wouldn't even know where to start. That would be cool, but I think it would have to reach a much bigger audience to get to that status. Comic book, I've actually kind of been pushing that idea around a little bit and thought it might be a good introduction. So comic book, very, very possible. Video game, that would be up to the IP and where it goes. I would assume a lot of times people from video game companies approach different IPs about it. So,
Okay.
But your
that.
thought of a,
I'd have no idea where to start with that.
your thought of a board game?
Actually, yeah, I've been developing a board game with a friend of mine that we were talking about kickstarting. It has nothing to do with this, but I guess it could be adaptable to this, and if it's successful and it's something the fans want, it's definitely something that could be worked on in the future. I'm a big board game player, and I've got a friend that's got thousands and thousands of board games. So that's a regular thing and also an interest of mine. So yeah, that could happen.
So on the marketing side of things, how did you do that? Like, did you run to the local library or wherever, or was it all online?
All online.
Oh.
The majority of the sales came from Facebook, basically. So when you do a Kickstarter, it lets you see the data and where the sources are coming from and everything. We had referrers set up so that each person had their own individual thing, so you could see kind of where the audience is coming from. So Kickstarter had a lot just from searches and people going on Kickstarter, but the most came from Facebook. So doing the Facebook ads, they didn't really seem to pan out much, but we also didn't delve too deep into the Facebook ads. I know there's more expensive ads that can actually reach out a little further, and we didn't really try those. We just kind of dipped our toes in that. But I think most of it came from word of mouth on Facebook, just us, throwing it out there with the link to the Kickstarter and stuff like that, which again is painful because you have a day where you're not getting very many backers, and you want to throw up an ad somewhere. And a lot of, Facebook groups and stuff either don't allow that or it's only once a week. So we posted on the Dragonlance pages, a couple of times, but I also know a couple of people that run like the Dragonlance Nexus and stuff. So I got a little bit of leeway and permission to do a few things that aren't usually allowed, but I felt bad. I don't know how to explain it, but I just didn't want to spam people. If there's one person out of 100 that looks at that ad that, wants to be a part of it and get in on it, I'd like to be able to get that person in, but for the other 99 people, I don't want to bug them. They're like, oh my God, here's that stupid ad again. God, seems like it's always on here. So it's a weird balance trying to get people that you want, that are would be attracted to your work and get them involved while not bothering people that don't care,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's if you can figure out how to market your Kickstarter, then you're a millionaire. That's, I guess, the way it works. So.
Yeah.
I'm not a millionaire, so I don't know. That's not. I don't like to give advice on that. Something I'm not good at. So
Hmm. Yeah. That's a good point. So what now that I'll just slightly get off the topic, but what is your favorite mythic, or I guess I should say fantasy universe you've ever read?
Korean, definitely. So Dragonlance, without a doubt. Lord of the Rings. I'm also a pretty big Lord of the Rings fan. Conan. Forgotten Realms a little bit. I used to not be that big of a fan of Forgotten Realms, probably until the last 10 or 15 years, but kind of getting into that a little more as I get older. But yeah, I'd say that those are my top three: Dragonlance, Lord of the Rings, and Conan.
Okay. Well, I'm out of questions,
Thank you.
both written and off the top of my head. I'm completely out. Um, I'll just ask Dan and Tom if they've got any.
I'm fresh out. All the questions
fre-
I've had were already answered.
I'm and on your future books, so you have an idea for a trilogy of anthology books.
Yes.
Are you
Yes,
gonna,
it'll very creatively. I've come up with the titles of Legends of Lornia Part or um, Volume 2 and Legends of Lornia Volume 3. So
have you ever thought of collaborating with with other writers as well besides what you've collaborate with, or you stick with them?
no, they are of course welcome back, and I have talked to them about doing the second one, and everybody is pretty much said that they're on board for doing it. But the next two will be a little bit larger than this one because I am in talks with a couple of people, kind of under NDAs at the moment, so I can't really.
Okay.
And they haven't committed completely either. I will say that I did reach out to Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. At the time I reached out to them, I didn't know it, but they were also in NDAs with the new Dragonlance books.
Oh yeah.
And so at the time I thought Wizards was completely out of the book game. So I got an immediate no. It was told for undisclosed reasons that they couldn't say that they were working on something that they could not work on any other fantasy projects at the time. So
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, I can.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't know about Joe or Dan, but if I would love a chance at maybe in the future, maybe collaborating with you on a story.
Okay. Yeah, that's another thing. We are definitely reaching out to amateur writers. That was one of the things I thought is bringing on a new writer in each of the next two books to get you have your known writers, and then you have like an amateur writer do a story in each one. I was the amateur writer in this one. So
Well,
got that.
By the way you talk, you don't sound much like an amateur. You sound, well, pretty experienced if you ask me. So
Well, amateur as far as the world knows. I've been writing
Yeah.
since I was probably about 13 or 14.
Yeah.
Got legal. I like I said, I would show you, but they're all in storage right now. But I have hundreds of legal pads where before I started actually using computers to write on, I just wrote stories all the time. So working on this project really showed me how amateur I was, though. I've always thought I was good at grammar, and I always thought I was good at, the rules of writing. I was not.
Yeah.
So I've got Gene to thank for that. Gene really, really helped me. Gene and Donald Bingle both just were so helpful. Basically, what I got out of it was, my stories were good, the writing was not.
Well,
So
James A.
things like
Mishner,
very. What's that?
well, James A. Mishner is once quoted saying, "I know for a fact that I may be a lousy writer, but I am really a great rewriter."
So there's certain rules I wasn't aware of, and you look at a lot of classic writing, and there's a lot of adjectives, and and you kind of get that feel like this wasn't important. It was very important, but it's not. It's just important. So things like that, like getting rid of varies and just not trying to over establish certain things. You're trying to. It's like you want to really describe something, but unless you're Stephen King, you just can't pull it off. You have to be somebody already to set up a certain way. And that's another thing. Stephen King was a big thing for me growing up reading Stephen King stuff. And normally when somebody's describing something, it's kind of painful. If they're trying to get into way too many details and stuff, and while you're reading, it's just really boring. But to me, Stephen King convinced, he could spend 2 chapters on describing what the town cotton mill is like. Something you're completely uninterested in, but you've already read it, and it is somehow entertaining. But the rest of the world, you can't really do that because you don't really have his writing style. So that was part of my problem, was just a lot of descriptive stuff, that unnecessary words.
Yeah, I
If you
published.
run to the store, you're not running hastily to the store. People should know that because you're running. So you just run to the store. And that was my biggest lesson, was learning how to stop putting in all the little adjectives and stuff. Get your point across and move on. Unless it's very important to the story, of course.
Yeah, I published one book thus far, and it's a Western, but I've ran into similar problems that you've had, where I just because I read as far as fantasy or pulp fiction goes, I read stuff that were done like the first early days of the 20th century. So a lot of that was a lot more. It's not exactly what people read style that the average person reads today from all these new authors. So I kind of, it's like a night. It's like you're trying to tackle marry night with day, basically.
Yeah.
All
Now,
right.
there is one part that I ignored. The advice I got, some of the edits I got back, they were like, this is grammatically incorrect. This doesn't sound right, or whatever. And I paid attention to all of that except for when people are talking, because people don't talk correctly. So anytime it's in between quotations, I was like, nah, I'm leaving that in because that's how that character's. I didn't make that grammatical mistake, the character did. So I guess that can look bad to, grammar Nazis. They're looking, oh my gosh, look at this. He did a mistake, and nope, I'm clean. I'm free and clear from that. That was the character's mistake, not mine. That's how they talk. That's how they talk. So that's the one advice I take. I kept that stuff in.
Yeah, if you're writing writing about people in Appalachia versus people in Brooklyn, there is going to be a difference on how they talk to each other. And if you give it to like one of these uppity college English people, they kind of see things narrowly when it comes to one way.
Yeah, well, when you read this, you'll see, because there are some misspelled words purposely in dialogue because I'm trying to get across their accent or whatever. And I've been told not to do that, that today's writers don't do that, but I don't care. I want the reader to get the idea that this guy talks a little different, or whatever. So,
yeah. What's interesting is one of the most celebrated historic fiction writers, Nigel Tranter, liked to include in his dialogue things like nay and terms that were actually, if you spell it in English, basically it's incorrect, is how when he'd write a lot of the dialogue. But when you understand a bit of Scots and Gaelic, you realize he was actually writing, at times he was throwing in Gaelic and Scots into his English so that he'd convey in a way what a Scottish conversation might sound like. And it's like, once you read some of his work and then you talk to people from Scotland, you go, oh, they really do talk like that. And he captured it perfectly. Whereas if you were to get, let's say, your average English major, such as myself, to try to write it half the time, we kind of write what would sound probably more like a conversation between a regular Englishman or like someone from North America, or like a large part of North America. And the way we talk might be, in a way, a little more correct, I guess, than the Scots. But the Scots talk very differently because they have their accent, they've got their dialect. So yeah, I'm actually going to agree kind of with your decision there, because dialogue should sound different than, say, description. But yeah,
and all of my dwarves are Scottish, basically. So,
but
anytime I use a voice for a dwarf or something, they're Scottish. That's just a rule. You can't get around it.
All right.
Yeah, well, especially when you look at the diversity of the English language, whereas you have the British English, the Scottish English, the Welsh English, and over on Australia you have the Australian. Then New Zealand, there's the Kiwi, and out here there's like you got the huge difference between what you would hear in like Fargo country versus in Texas country.
Darn tootin'.
Because one thing that I did notice about accents is that there's definitely a difference between how, for example, Sam and Frodo talk in Lord of the Rings and Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah. Tolkien was a linguist too, so he had every right to do whatever he wanted.
Yeah, especially since he wrote the Oxford dictionaries and whatnot, and these were kind of the English Académie Française. So he basically helped define what the language was and the grammar was. So those of us who don't like English grammar have him to blame for a lot of these rules in the modern age. I'm joking here, but actually a lot of his reforms and additions and contributions have, from what I understand, been thrown out in recent years, which is a shame because he knew what he was doing when he made those changes to the English language and
Well,
whatnot.
that's the bad thing about publishers today. Editors for major publications and stuff, they won't allow you to do. You have rules, and if you don't follow them, I think they're just taught that.
Well,
you could lose something that was going to be published because you refused to change it to their standards. And I'm not all about the rules. Like there's something that I do a lot that's called head skipping. The reason for it, I understand, because if you don't do it right, it gets very confusing to the reader because you're writing it from an all-knowing point of view. Like the reader knows everything. So even though the 3 or 4 characters that are talking don't know everything, the reader does, and it gets complicated if you don't do it right. So skipping from one person's point of view to the other to another, that's very frowned upon.
I never.
But like I said, I got a lot of my writing skills from reading Stephen King, who does that a lot, and he does it good. I've never been confused by his stuff, so I do it a lot. So I did it a lot on this story, and both of the main editors that did it, they really got onto me for it, and I had to go back and rewrite a lot of stuff because I skipped around from character to character without any notations, that I was changing character point of view. Although I felt like I did it well, I was still, nope, don't do that. So I had to go back and change it.
I guess I'm the odd man in the room because I love
Yeah,
but well, I try to. Yeah.
Until your name is bigger than the title of your book and you're the selling point, you don't get to make up your own little rules like that, I guess.
Fair enough.
If you ever know, Stephen King is always bigger than the title of his book. So, because that's what's going to sell it.
Yeah.
So,
well,
he can do what he wants. He could wipe his butt with a piece of paper and I guarantee it would sell.
Probably. But
by the way, a little interesting note on that. Stephen King was in a band called the Rock Bottom Remainders, which came to Nashville back in the 90s. So I went to the concert, front row, standing right in front of him, not 5 feet away from him. They took a break and their editors all came out to sing some songs. So he said, I want to prepare everybody for this. So he pulls out a bunch of earplugs and starts throwing them out to the audience. So I am one of the luckiest person in the world for he took 2 and stuck them up his nose.
Ew, that's gross.
Yes. And then he blew them out and one of them landed at my feet and I picked it up. And I have Stephen King's nose booger on an earplug. Yep.
Okay.
Probably, sad thing is, I'm probably not the only one that can say that. But.
Yeah.
So.
But I didn't know he could sing, so learned something new.
Yeah.
They weren't very good. They sung old 50s and 60s tunes and stuff, and they weren't great, but it was just a fun thing. It was, Matt Groening from The Simpsons, the Simpsons writers, he was a part of it. It was just a bunch of writers and editors just having a little fun, making a little extra money.
Oh, okay. Well, looks like Tom and Dan are going to have to start a band at some point.
Yeah, but I'm to do that with the nose thing, though.
No,
definitely not.
We're not famous. So
the venue that we had it at is used to be a very big venue around here that everybody loved. It was small and it had like no air at all. So the performers were constantly pouring water on themselves, using towels, Anyway, so he's constantly got this towel. He's getting all the sweat off of him. When he was done, he'd throw him out into the audience. Yeah.
All right.
So I got lucky enough. I got his booger DNA.
Well, you could always clone him.
Not his sweat.
And there's
Had
the
a
plot of
little-
the next horror movie. Or a horror book.
I got a little DNA from him, so got my little clone Stephen King growing in a jar.
Well, in that case, I think this is a good place to end.
Let's stop with the nose boogers. All right.
Yeah. So,
Good place to end.
yeah. Now, because I'm not sure whether or not we'll have some technical problems with the description, the comment section will have, hopefully I can pin it, the link to your Kickstarter and anywhere else you'd want us to basically link to.
Okay. I do have the Facebook page for Darkworld, so that'll
All right.
probably be better. The Kickstarter's over with, so
All right. We'll link it.
I don't know what good it would do. That I guess I could link to my Kickstarter page and people could follow me. That'd be great.
Yeah, we'll link to it.
Yeah, I can email you all that.
Yeah, and we can make sure that way that people with the next Kickstarter will know when it pops up and to support it.
Oh, and for those
And they really need to be. Go ahead.
Those who have missed the Kickstarter, where can they get the book in the future when it comes out?
So I'm doing a non-exclusive setup on onebookshelf.com, which is drive-through fiction, and the game will be on drive-through RPG. So that's being set up, and once that goes live, everybody that's pledged is going to get a coupon, a little code to get it for free as far as paying for it. But then, you'll have to pay the printing and shipping costs. But anybody else can go on there. And for people who got in on the Kickstarter, you got a discount. So it's going to be a little bit more for people who missed out on the Kickstarter. But, yeah, and in all of the future Kickstarters, it will be added as an add-on. So, and probably cheaper. I probably shouldn't say that. Then nobody will get it outside of the Kickstarter. But sort of to entice people to the Kickstarter, we'll probably have it discounted a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on. And
Yeah, thank you. Thank you,
problem.
Patrick.
yeah.
Some dude.
Yeah. And hopefully some people will also remember to smash that like and that subscribe button, because, well, it'd be nice to get to 20 subs, I guess. Well, we've got the goal of trying to get to 100 as quickly as possible, so that way we can keep riding the wave, so to speak. And hopefully, if you would like, when your next project comes out, hopefully we can interview you and have you back on the show and help out. In even if it's just like a little bit, we can hopefully direct people to the next Kickstarter when it does get launched.
Yeah, the one thing I learned is that, you never know where that one person's going to come from. So
Yeah, that's a
it
good
might
point.
reach 1,000 people and only one person,
Contributes.
commits. But hey, that's one person didn't have before. So
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, thank you, Patrick. Wish you all the
Yes.
best.
you're welcome.
I'm
Thank
looking
you.
forward to getting the book when it's ready.
Yeah.
I'm tired of it. That has officially become my most read book. I'm not an actual editor, but I had to go back in and reread everybody's story. I don't even know how many times. So
No, that
I'm
feeling.
done with it. I'm ready for the next one. So.
Yeah.
Well,
tired of reading my own stuff. It's a lot of reading, going back, rewriting, and getting everything right. So, and
Yeah.
I guarantee you, there's still stuff wrong in it. So,
yeah. Well, the joys and pains of being a writer and editor. So, until next time, everyone, I guess we should come up with a clever outro, but don't go being a Horde member, I guess. That's all I'll say. Just stick with the Alliance.